watching Reddit Aliens, the weekly compilation. No relief, no breaks, just story after story sinking deeper into the dark. If you're listening with headphones, good. If you're alone, better. Enjoy now, and subscribe.
People who aren't superstitious, what is something that still creeps you out / you won't mess with? I don't know where these superstitions originated or how exactly they're supposed to work because I live in the American South and we have a bunch of superstitions from both Europe and Africa, but most people around here paint their roofs over their porches a specific shade of blue to ward off bad spirits. I also turn my shoes in 2 different directions after I take them off by the door. This supposedly confuses hags, haints, bad juju in general so it won't find you. I do this fully recognizing how ridiculous it is. Skinwalkers. I was roommates in college with a Navajo guy, and I was far from home, so spent some holidays with his family. They had so many stories, but when it came to skinwalkers, they would clam up fast, and they would never talk about them after the sun went down. Maybe they were messing with me, but I'm still terrified of them. I grew up with stories of Bell Witch. As an adult, I don't believe any of it is real, but it was such a huge part of the culture I grew up with in Tennessee. We used to dare each other to call for her 3 times in front of a mirror in a dark room. None of my family or friends ever did it. My mom claimed she did it once and ended up with scratches down her face. To this day, I don't have the balls to do it. I'm getting an eerie feeling just typing this out. Generally not superstitious, but I grew up in Hawaii and there is a legend about the night marchers, spirits of ancient warriors that are constantly marching to war. They say if you hang around an ancient Hawaiian rock wall after dark, you will upset the night marchers. One time, my brother and I and some friends went camping and we found remnants of an old rock wall. We kind of thought about the legend, but the remnants passed under a tree and we wanted to set up a tent under the tree for extra protection from the rain. Anyway, we set up a tarp and a tent underneath and pretty close to the wall, hang out, eat food, etc., and finally go to sleep. We wake up to water dripping through our tent. And when we step out, the tent had been moved away from the wall and out from under the tree and tarp we had set up. The tent had been moved at least 20 feet. At first, we were trying to be rational and thought it must be a joke, that one of us stepped out and moved the tent when the rest were asleep. But we tried putting 3 of us in the tent and one guy couldn't move it, and it definitely would have woken up anyone in the tent. I won't take the dare of staying overnight in an abandoned, haunted house, room, whatever. First of all, it probably got the reputation because something is inherently wrong with the building. It was not up to code, or they left a gap that weather or animals could get in, or something else stupid. Secondly, in an abandoned place, there is probably mold, mildew, nasty bugs, and possibly homeless creeps, if not hungry rats or something calling the place home. Definitely unhealthy, even on a sunny day, let alone at night. Not even plumbing would be working, so it would be a bad camping trip. Third, it's possible someone creepy would find out I was taking the "I dare you to spend one night alone there" dare, and could decide to, at best, try to scare the tar out of me, and at worst, rape, torture, and murder. Lastly, there is always the chance it really is haunted, and I might just have a heart attack out of fright. I will not wish death upon anyone anymore, no matter how much I despise them. Because the 2 times that I have, someone close to me has died shortly afterwards, my uncle and a cousin. Maybe it was purely coincidental, maybe not, but I've looked at it as my karma for wishing harm upon someone. I was able to postpone a final I wasn't prepared for in college by telling my professor that my aunt died. My aunt ended up actually dying the day after from a brain aneurysm, and her funeral was held on the same day as my makeup final. It's 13 years later. And I still regret that and don't fuck with that kind of shit anymore. I'm not religious, nor am I superstitious, but that fucked me up and it felt like I caused her death. Both my parents are non-religious, very pragmatic people, and I'm their creepy black sheep type daughter. For some reason having to do with a story from his teen years that my dad refuses to talk about. Weird, because he's a very talkative person. I was never allowed to have a Ouija board. I've watched scary movies since I was little with my parents. They never cared about any of my darker interests, but that's where the line was. To this day, I've never touched one, and I've been out of the house for half a decade. I'm a nurse, and saw my fair share of dead people, 2 as of yesterday. but I have a keen sense of this person is going to die today. Like sometimes I dreamt of my patient dying, and the day after I learned that he died at the exact time. I also had strange dreams, such as one time, the one that creeped me out the most. I dreamt that I forgot to buy a birthday present for the girlfriend of my boyfriend's BFF, a girl I met once, and that I don't follow on any social media. When I told him about my dream, he laughed it off, just to come back 1 hour later with an uneasy look on his face. And he showed me her Facebook page. It was indeed her birthday. I had no way to know. It was awkward. These very specific dreams creep me out sometimes, and sometimes I feel in my guts that my patient will die, and I rarely get mistaken. Like, nearly never. I want to believe that is from experience, but I am indeed a young nurse. Dead bodies. I had a roommate who worked part-time in a funeral home as a driver. While it was fun getting roses in a limo acting like I'm a someone, other times he'd ask for my help and I'd get into the van and realize there was a body in the back. The mortician there was really cute and my age, but naturally her humor was very dark. I felt weird being around dead bodies, but for them it was daily life. Not necessarily creepy, and it's probably controversial to consider it superstition, but I mean well. When I was still a Christian, one day at youth group, we were playing soccer outside. A fully lit up ambulance passed by and everyone stopped playing immediately to pray for the well-being of a patient. I'm not religious anymore. I don't believe in anything supernatural or superstitious. But whenever I see a lit up ambulance pass by or an air ambulance fly overhead, I still pray for those inside. Grew up in the hood of El Paso, Texas, where our backyard was dark forest for a good chunk of my life. Stories of La Llorona and Huechivo still make me not want to wander the desert at night. Huechivo is the one that gets me. Living out there, you could always see red lights that could be mistaken for eyes, and even Coca-Cola cans reflect off the moonlight would convince me there's a monster out there waiting to suck the livelihood from my body. I go to school at Ohio State University. I live in a dorm on campus. I swear to God it's haunted. Didn't even believe in ghosts until I got to this dorm, and my bathroom door will randomly open without anybody touching it, even though it's very firmly shut. It's even happened when it was locked once. My boyfriend has also seen it happen and apparently said ghost is impatient because I often pull up videos on my laptop which doesn't have autoplay turned on, and randomly the videos will start playing. I honestly don't even know whether to be scared or not. My Nana always had anecdotes about people who have had strange experiences with the supernatural and paranormal, and this one stayed with me. She said she knew someone who was using a Ouija board and ended up having a mental breakdown after using it. Whether it was because he was being haunted by a ghost, or he went mad thinking he was being haunted by a ghost, or it just affected him psychologically, my Nana never elaborated, but it scared the shit out of me. I will never put a hat on a bed, even for a second, or a couch for that matter. That's about the only superstition I've ever taken seriously, and I have no idea what it means, and only seen it in one other place, in a movie from the 80s, Drugstore Cowboy. But my dad told me once when I was a kid, kind of an offhand comment, but for some reason, I've always taken it seriously, and I even pass it on to my sons. My wife hates it, lol. I don't fuck with anything indigenous people warn people about, things like skinwalkers or wendigos, and of course indigenous people aren't a monolith. These are just examples that aren't part of every tribe's beliefs, but these are the things I've been warned about specifically. Yeah, it's partly because I want to respect their beliefs, especially when the whole damn world seems determined to shit on them, but it's also because it all freaks me out on some deep animal level. They've been here long enough to know what's going on, and I'm not inclined to find out what it is they've seen. Ouija board. About a decade ago, I had just moved back to my hometown. My friends had picked me up and we were all having drinks and whatnot at their apartment when a couple of girls we knew came over. They brought a Ouija board with them, and I was pretty vocal about just not messing with that kind of shit. One of my buddies agreed with me, and we took off to help me get settled back in at home since I hadn't unpacked yet, then got some dinner. We returned back to the apartment at 10 o'clock, and our friends were sitting together in the living room with every light in the apartment turned on. They all had a look of terror on their faces, and they told the two of us that we were right, and the Ouija board freaked them all the fuck out. I asked what they did with it, and my friend said that he threw it in the complex's dumpster because he didn't want it around. The girls stayed over, and we all slept in the living room watching movies. Very early that morning, I needed to get home and figure out a job and etc. So it's around 6 a.m. and I'm leaving the apartment. The Ouija board was on the doormat, sitting there open-faced. I woke up my friend and told him it was a lame joke, and he began having a panic attack. He swore on his life he had thrown it away and begged me to get rid of it. I didn't touch it and left for home. Nothing aside from that ever happened or stemmed from it, but even a decade or so later, the same buddy won't even watch a horror movie because of that. Literally nothing unnatural. I'm fine walking down dark alleys at night, don't care about going to the basement in the middle of the night with the lights off, whatever. Two things creep me out. Swimming in deep ocean water, even though I know it's pretty safe, I can't shake the feeling knowing there's a shot in the water that can eat me. This one might be weird, but there's a certain look to someone when they've cracked and aren't thinking reasonably anymore. I've seen it more times than I want to, and I'll usually fuck right off backwards at a high speed when I come across it. So, swimming in deep water and other people. In most regards, I consider myself very stably set in observable reality. I'm the sort of person who thinks along the lines of ideas like Newton's flaming laser sword logically. If it can't be tested or addressed, I'm probably done with it before it started. I'm not very outward about this unless asked directly. Stories and fiction are important, and we make sense of life using them, which includes astrology, superstition, and so on. No harm, no foul. With that being said, to give you an idea of the sort of person I am almost completely convinced that I have a relationship with a random chance luck. I'll admit, if I looked closer at the overall pattern, I might not find this to be true, but random chance and luck consistently disfavors me until it matters. Playing a TTRPG, I roll frequently sequential ones on a d20 in a statistically unlikely frequency. If there is a 2% chance for a bad outcome on something, I will land very squarely in that. Poker hands will be hot garbage, and I have to play with that. So on, so forth. I'm not a big fan of gambling at this point, but when random life chance matters, it comes out in my favor. I'm not ready for an exam for the one time or haven't done the work on an assignment. Some bizarre domino effect ticks over in the universe consistently, and something will happen to give me time. If I'm having issues with a project at work, something will happen to make it work out. No action of my own. Something out of the ordinary will happen that makes me miss a car crash that could have been bad. Random impulses will put me in the right place at the right time for work or life in general when it matters. All in all, I'm convinced that while my random chance luck is cursed, it comes with a payoff. I have no logic to support this, just a series of one rolls, weird math outcomes, and a lot of favorable coincidences. 31-year-old male. I wouldn't say that I'm superstitious or anything, but I also don't fuck with any of it. I figure if I'm not going to participate in superstitions, then I should try my hardest to not even acknowledge that they are there by completely staying away from any instance of them. Unfortunately, that means the good ones too. So any pennies I see heads up on the ground, I just walk away. And God forbid if my son finds a 4-leaf clover and asks me if it's lucky. That when someone dies, their soul lingers for a few days in our realm. You have to tell them it's okay to leave or ask what unfinished business they have and help them out, or else they won't leave to their final resting place. I'm not too religious, but grew up Catholic. When my husband's grandpa died 2 days later, 2 of the daughters of the deceased invited a lady who sees things when in prayer and is her friend. This was 4 years ago. The woman had cancer and already passed away. I was waiting for my ride, but they invited me to pray while I waited. We were in St. Caesar's house. The lady started a normal rosary, but started saying that, let's call him Caesar, was still here. So the daughters told him, Dad is okay to go. Go find Mom. We are okay. The praying lady said he couldn't leave because he was worried about the family business and some specific stuff about some money. There was no way the lady knew the specifics. It did shock me. Latin women, usually older, who deal with brujeria, witchcraft. I don't believe in any of their spells or chants, but the fact that they'd go out of their way to obtain some of the items needed for a spell is bugged out. My ex-girlfriend's mom and grandmother were very heavy into brujeria. Her mom was trying to make her boyfriend at the time propose to her by getting his worn underwear, a picture of him smiling, a piece of jewelry that he loved, and a bit of his blood. She then put it all in a small wooden bowl and placed the Grim Reaper on it. I remember walking to the bathroom and suddenly seeing a black statue sitting on a bowl with about 10 candles surrounding it. My ex casually says, oh, that's not the worst. My grandma has done way worse. Fuck that. I'm not one to look into my dreams too in depth, but I've had some that made me feel odd. A year ago, I had a dream that my aunt's husband came into my pharmacy to pick up her medication. I used to work at CVS Pharmacy as a tech, and he would come in there occasionally to pick up her meds. She had been fighting ovarian cancer for some time. I quit that job in January of 2017, so it was very odd to me that I would dream of it and mundane task of giving him her medication. Anyway, the very next morning, my mom tells me that my aunt passed away that same night. I had another dream where I dreamt that I had this loyal pet crow. The very next day, I come home and my dad is holding a crow in our backyard. Apparently, it got hit and stunned by a passing car right in front of our house. It was alive, just wouldn't fly away. I bought my house from my dad, who used it as a rental property. He lived in it briefly when he and my mom first separated. He claims there is an entity that resides on the 3rd floor. He saw red eyes and a shadow at the top of the stairs one night. He also thinks it is the reason why some of his tenants went crazy. He had a pattern of bad tenants who stopped paying rent, and he was forced to evict them. I love spooky stories, but I'm very skeptical about real-life occurrences. Nevertheless, I never look up the stairs to the 3rd floor unless the light is on, and I avoid going up there at night. My guest room is up there, and my one rule for guests is if they see anything, don't tell me, unless they think I'm in danger. What is a creepy story you want to share? Part 2. My husband was smoking in our alleyway, feeling stressed out and sad after losing a loved one. This homeless guy we called the Birdman came walking down the alley. He was an old black man who wore a big cross necklace, and he always had an injured bird in the basket of his bicycle. You could always tell he was in the alley because a swarm of seagulls and crows followed him everywhere. If you live in Venice, California, you might know him. Anyway, he says to my husband, "Man, are you okay? I'm concerned about you." My husband says, "Yeah, I'm fine, but thanks." He says, "Man, God is good. Watch this." And he points to a pile of leaves on the ground. He then lifts his hands up over his head. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this gust of wind picks up the leaves and swirls them in a circle above them. When he puts his hands down, the leaves settle down and the wind is totally gone. The Birdman said, "See, that is God. Have a blessed day," and walks away. I was in a local pub, went to the bathroom. Chick in there right fucked up. Asked me to pack a bowl for her in her pipe. Fuck, she's smoking in there. I'm smoking my cigs in there. We get to talking. "Have you seen Ghosts?" "Yeah, sure. The movie with Patrick Swayze?" "No, Ghosts." Bathroom door slams open, then slams shut. I run to the door to see if anyone was out there. No one. I look at her and she's just nodding at me like she knew what I just experienced. I do not believe in ghosts, but I cannot explain that. When I moved to my first apartment in LA, I was dozing off to sleep. Suddenly, I felt something grab my shoulders and pull me down into the mattress. A man's voice said, "If you want to communicate, just relax." I shot up in bed and thought, WTF? I stayed up for a few minutes, then wrote it off as a bad dream. As I started to fall asleep again, the same thing happened. Something grabbed my shoulders and said, "If you want to communicate, just relax." This time I sat up and said, "No." Never had a dream like that in my life. To this day, I believe it was something dark trying to talk to me. I've had sleep paralysis most nights for the last few years. It is like a deceased family member sitting on my chest, undressing me while fondling and molesting me with an eerie laugh, and I couldn't even move a muscle or scream. Creepiest part was I woke up naked in the morning without ever remembering taking my clothes off voluntarily. Prescription benzos have stopped the episodes now. When I was around 12, me and my friend were in a forest, jumping our bikes off a rock. We kept moving to find more rocks, and a man with a baby carriage was coming up behind us talking on a phone. He stopped whenever we stopped, and kept going when we did. He eventually started pacing, then I realized he was holding his hand to his head with no actual phone, still talking, and the carriage was empty. We got out fast. Here we go. When I studied languages, a teacher, a woman, introduced me by my full name on my first day of class before even knowing me. I had just signed up, and there's no way she had enough time to update the list of students due to me being late. However, the most disturbing thing is that one day we were obliged to discuss paranormal things at class, since the topic of the books were horror movies. Anyway, she started talking about her psychic abilities when growing up, when suddenly an open window gets closed on its own. I was excited for not seeing her any longer after the course was over, Trust me, she creeped me out. I ran away on a cold night when I was 16. I was having mental problems and I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to wander off into a field and die. I was walking around the neighborhood until I found a field to lay in. I slept on and off for a few hours until the snow on the ground made me feel so cold in my light jacket. I wandered up to the nearest house that still had snow in their driveway and asked to shovel their snow. I love shoveling snow, and it would help me feel warm. I didn't realize it was almost 11:40 p.m. though, so when they came to the door, they were obviously confused. Instead of letting me shovel their driveway, they called the sheriff. Eventually, the sheriff found me in the field across from their house. When the husband came looking for me to give me a hat, all was well and I returned home. 2 days later, I was transported to Utah to a residential youth center to spend the next year getting help. Well, that's not scary, but what is scary is what happened just down the street from where I was 2 days later. A man had been on a killing spree, broke into a home and murdered the elderly couple. If I had ran away 2 nights later, I may have been killed as well, or maybe the police activity could have saved that poor couple. I think about it every day. I'm sure I was briefly investigated as well, until they realized that I had left the city that morning just before they were believed to have been killed, and the crime had similar details as the 2 murders down south. This happened a few years back. I was around 9 or 10. My grandfather likes this one camping spot in the middle of nowhere, but has a little nice town 2 miles away. It's 70 miles out of Chicago. We stood there once with most of my first family. All we had was a few tents and food. Some of us decided to go on a group walk, and as we were on the walk, we saw a man in all white with a white hood in his hand, taking a cigarette break. As you might expect, there was a KKK meeting. Good thing it wasn't too close from us. My family is Hispanic, so I was sweating bullets that night, but we were fine. Also, some raccoons stole all of our meat. I was traveling with my family at Lake Tahoe and decided to go check out our rented house. Now, it was pretty modern and was pretty cool, but I swear at night I could hear people walking around the hallways. We were on vacation, so my dad, who usually stays up till like 3 for work, was asleep, and my mother and sister go to sleep at 9, and there was no point to leave the room because they had their own bathrooms. You can bet I didn't sleep at all the first few nights. If you ever have these situations, get a dog because it's the only thing that will comfort you. I was walking through our village to the bus station. There was a guy walking behind me. He was going to school as well. A few times I turned around and he was always there like 30 meters behind until I crossed a bridge. There, I stopped turning around. When all was far away from the bridge, way further away, the distance me and the guy had before, I heard a scream coming from behind from the bridge. I turned around and he was nowhere to be seen. I didn't think anything of it and just went to school. It happened 1 year ago at spring. I was driving with my friend at night through an abandoned area. We saw a small path through the woods, so we went for it. After 15 minutes of driving, we lost signals and our phone batteries died and strange noises were coming from the car. So we stopped, started to turn around the car. As we turned around with the car and the lights were pointing at the trees, we saw a very old person 5 meters away, straight looking at us. He looked like he had back problems and was almost face down to the floor. He had a very big nose and just some areas of gray long hair. No shirt, only black pants. And the scariest thing was where he was standing. Next to him were bushes and high grass, as if he was hiding something. We successfully turned around and got out of there where we came from. Trust me, you don't want this to happen to you. I will never forget it. A hallucination I experienced a few months ago. I passed out on the couch due to exhaustion after work, and I woke up immediately when I heard a distant conversation going on outside. I look out my window and I see 6 people, 4 men and 2 women, all wearing jackets, beanies, and gloves. I turned the TV off and knelt down next to see what they were going to do, and I tried to listen closely. The only thing I heard was one of the women laughing and saying, "Yeah," over and over. They started walking around my place and continued their conversation on my back porch. I watched from my kitchen doorway, and they all started to laugh hysterically. One of the men started to knock on the back door. I grabbed my keys, locked the front door, and got in my car, drove downtown, and slept in my car at the end of a Walmart parking lot. When I was 11 years old, I was on a private beach with a couple of my friends. One of my friends lives in the area, so we all had permission to be there. But anyway, it was around 9:30 p.m. and we were just kind of sitting around and about 150 feet away from the houseboat my parents owned, and they called us over for dinner. So we went over, and me and my friend, who weren't part of the private beach group, decided to go back to the beach before my friend, who did have permission, got there. Quite the mistake. So we walked over, and there was now some random couple on the opposite side of the beach. Now keep in mind, this beach was tiny. It was on the side of a lake, and it was only around 70 feet long, so we were semi-close. Anyway, my friend and I were kind of just sitting around building sandcastles and such when this woman starts slowly moving closer to us with her boyfriend. I didn't think much of it, so I kind of ignored it, but I got kind of uneasy. So I started yelling my friend's name, who had permission to be on the beach. I yelled his name for like 5 minutes when this woman walks up to me and my friend and looks me in the eyes. I could tell something was wrong with her. She had some kind of insane look in her eye. I looked at her and said, "Hello?" She proceeded to look at me and my friend and then goes out of nowhere, "How old are you?" I'm kind of startled by this, so I lie about my age while my friend doesn't. I said I'm 13, and my friend said I'm 14. In actuality, my friend was 14 going on 15 in about 3 days. After we tell her our ages, this woman looks us dead in the eyes and says, "Leave." I look at her and ask why. She looks really pissed off at this point. "Leave, or else I'm going to call the police." I'm kind of shaking at this point because I'm getting really nervous. This random woman confronting us at 10 p.m. on a beach we aren't supposed to be on. "Because you're too young to be here," she says, really irritated now. I'm just kind of looking at her in awe because I really thought she was going to say that we couldn't be on the beach, which would be completely true, but she didn't. Anyway, while me and my friend tugs at my sweatshirt in like a "come on, we gotta leave" kind of way, I stand my ground and look at her, but I'm standing my ground in a confused, fearful way. The woman proceeds to stomp closer to me and yells, "Leave." We left after that. I couldn't do much of anything against her because I didn't have a phone at the time, and my friend who had permission to be at the beach, he didn't come because he was eating a chicken parm wedge. But yeah, I don't know if anyone would find it creepy besides me, but it's just something that has stuck with me, and I always come back to it from time to time. When we were in middle school, my friends and I would explore around into the woods. One day, a homeless-looking guy was calling us. He wanted to show us something in his tent. We all turned the other way and started riding our bikes. It was hard to go fast because it was a wooded area and branches were everywhere. Once we got closer to the main road, he caught up to us. He grabbed my friend by the shoulder and groped her butt. She turned around, kicked him in the balls, and we all ran. The guy chased us like 5 blocks. We ended up running into my friend's house. Luckily, his mom was home. She called the cops. The cops came and they found the guy hiding inside a ditch hole by the house. After we gave our report and they arrested him, the cops talked to my friend's mom. Later that night, my friend's parents walked us all home and told our parents what happened. My mom ended up telling me a few days later that the guy was on some drugs, but he was also a wanted sex offender. I'm glad we made it out that day. It's not exactly creepy, just strange and weird. Sometimes in the past, every time it rained and it was midnight, I could always hear a bell ringing, like a cathedral or a church one. The strange thing is that this was happening only when these two happened at the same time. It was midnight and it rained. If it was during the day or even before midnight, there wasn't any bell ringing. I thought that maybe it was from a nearby church, but not only they don't ring it at midnight, it's at least at 1 kilometer distance away. It isn't that loud either. You have to be near it to actually hear it. I tried to go outside and search for it because I was just too curious since this always happened, but I couldn't find the source of the sound, no matter what direction I went. It sounded like the distance didn't change at all. It was about 11 p.m., and I was on my college campus when I decided I wanted to go to Walgreens to get some snacks. I walked out, and as I walked to the sidewalk, I noticed a man walking in the same direction I'm going on the sidewalk. It was a black guy wearing a pink hoodie and black joggers. I got onto the sidewalk, and all of a sudden, the guy picks up his pace and passes me and walks at the crosswalk button, stands to the left of it, and stares right at me. So I walked to the button, trying to avoid eye contact, and pushed it and stood back a little. The guy is still staring directly at me, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I'm trying everything I can to avoid looking at him, but keeping him in my field of vision. All of a sudden, he starts laughing like a maniac and starts advancing towards me, reaching out to grab my left arm. Having about 6 years of martial arts experience, I automatically retreated backwards into a defensive stance. I was startled and I couldn't say a word. I didn't know what this guy was doing or what drug he could possibly be on. Then he stops and just starts laughing like a madman again. Then the crosswalk turns green, and I hesitate for a moment. This guy is probably going to follow me. I start walking and turn around to make sure he wasn't following or pull a pistol or something. He didn't move, just stood there, exact same spot, staring at me with an unnatural smile on his face. I came out of Walgreens and looked to see if he was still in the street. He had moved on. After calling the campus police and describing the man on the phone told me that the person was a notorious offender around campus and he still has not been caught. Probably not the creepiest story, but it still is the most creepy thing that's ever happened to me at university late at night. Many years ago, I'm 12 or so, driving back from hockey practice on a late January evening, my dad at the wheel. Nearest rink was 45 miles from our tiny town, which meant long, dark commutes in the winter. This particular night, it had just freshly snowed a few hours before, and the plows must have just hit the highways enough to make them drivable. The state highways we used to get from town to town were 2 lanes, one going one direction and another going in the opposite direction. No barricade in between, and barren as hell. You might pass 2 cars that late on a return home. We're driving down the frosty winter roads with nothing but thousands of acres of wilderness on our right and the frozen shores of Lake Huron on the left, with the headlights illuminating each snowflake before it hits the windshield and melts from the warm air blowing in the car. As we round a corner in the highway, a dog leaps out of the ditch lightning fast. My dad had 0 time to react, though he tried, hitting the brakes all too late. We pulled over onto the snowy shoulder of the highway, and my dad hopped out. It was obvious the dog had passed. My dad, feeling horrible, lifted the dog out of the highway. At late hours like this, he wasn't concerned it was a risk to walk out in the highway, as other vehicles coming down the road would be rare, and even if they had, you'd be able to see and hear a car coming well in advance. There was a driveway, about 300 yards up ahead. My dad figured the dog's owner likely lived there and wanted to knock on their door and let them know what happened, as opposed to driving away. He left the dog just off the side of the highway, on a snowy embankment, then hopped back in the truck, and we proceeded toward the driveway up ahead. We pulled up to the driveway, which from the road was probably 100 yards or so long before reaching the house. It was quite wide, relatively straight, and progressively elevated at a steady angle as it climbed the hill towards the property. Partially hidden by a lightly forested front yard stood a large luxury log home at the end of the drive, which you could only make out the roof and illuminated second-floor windows of until you had traveled up the driveway a bit. About halfway up the drive, there was a cheap metal gate with no lock, but that one would need to get out of the vehicle to open. The driveway had not been plowed from the fresh snow, but tire tracks dug in a path my dad could follow. My dad drove up to the metal gate, got out of his truck, and pushed it slowly to open it. A loud squeaking noise from the frozen metal on metal rang out as he did so. This is the moment I'll never forget. Seeing my dad, illuminated by the headlights, as he walked back to get into the truck, and watching his face turn from annoyed and cold to an expression of pure terror. My dad was a big guy, 6'2", 250. At that point in my life, I had only seen this expression on his face once before, when my sister was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease the year prior. This terrified look came as a response to every light turning off in the house at the same time, as well as the street lamp that was hanging over the gate, which, up until now, had been illuminating the driveway. It was pitch black and silent, aside from the lights of the truck and its running engine. My dad hustled back to the car immediately and decided we shouldn't be there. I could see a bit of panic in him as he decided he would need to rotate the truck in the driveway to be forward-facing as we left, because with the driveway being elevated and the street lamps that had been illuminated turned off, it would be incredibly difficult to see backing up with just the taillights. With about 50 yards or so to back up, he was worried he'd go in a ditch. I can remember this moment like yesterday. Cold air still tossing around the truck from when my dad had shut the door, the smell of sweat coming from my dad, which I now realize was from him being in a panic and my confusion with him acting that way, because nothing had happened and I was a dumb kid, but oddly also knowing something was very off with the situation, because as a child, nothing is more terrifying than having your parent act terrified in front of you. As my dad kept reversing and turning, then driving forward and turning, and repeating the process, my heart started beating faster and faster every time he shifted gears. I very clearly remember, for whatever reason, putting my hand on the door handle because I was expecting my dad to tell me, "Get out and run." I guess that was purely just from interpreting the tension of the situation in my 12-year-old mind. He just barely got the truck flipped in a driveway, which, although, as I said, was a wide driveway, it was maybe 5 inches away from being too narrow to have been able to turn the truck around, as soon as he had reversed it into position. So the front was now illuminating the path back down the highway. My dad pressed in the brake and began to shift the truck into drive. Now, I still have no idea if something caught my eye that made me look in the mirror, or I was so wound up and just feeling like I should be looking at the house. But as my gaze shifted to the side mirror, the red lights of the brakes had illuminated the silhouette of 2 people running, and I mean running, down the driveway towards our truck. I screamed, and my dad saw what I was looking at in his rearview mirror and slammed on the gas, nearly spinning out in the fresh snow of the driveway, and without stopping at the end of the drive to look for oncoming traffic, tore off back onto the highway. Most terrifying experience of my life. We only had one cell phone for the entire family at the time. It was the late 90s. Strange to think this was a thing. And my mom had to drive for work as well, so she always had the phone. As soon as we got into town, we stopped at my uncle's, who was closer than our house, to call the police. My uncle was friends with a few police officers at the time, and after telling him the story, he said he'd get the scoop on what happened and let us know. Turns out, that house we pulled up to was on the market, no one living in it, and the for sale sign had been ripped up and thrown in the woods. Police checked it out, and the back window screen had been cut, which the individuals must have then forced open the window to gain access to the house, and the front door was slightly ajar, but nothing seemed damaged or misplaced. They said besides a set of tire tracks out back for whatever vehicle the people had driven, there was a puddle of water at the front door, and there were 2 sets of footprints from the front porch down to the metal gate where we had been stopped. Police believe the intruders must have literally gotten into the home only moments before we went up the drive, and panicking when hearing a vehicle approaching must have cut the lights. They stood at the front door watching us in the driveway as the snow on their boots melted and made the puddle of water the police found. The police think that as we started to flip the truck around, they must have decided they could get to us before we were fully turned, which they almost did. The scariest part of all this, with the screen being cut, it meant at least one of them had a knife or similar sharp object on them the entire time. Serious. What is the most terrifying experience you've ever had? Part 2. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child and not sleeping well at night. I was laying in bed trying to find a comfortable position when I hear something that sounds like glasses tinkling together. I give my husband a shove and tell him what I heard. He grunts that it's probably one of our cats, rolls over and continues snoring. I still lay there. Then I hear men's voices. My heart felt like it stopped. I shove my husband hard and whisper that I hear people talking. He begrudgingly gets up. I tell him to get the gun just in case. He waves me off and heads to our bedroom door. I see his hand pause on the handle, and then he locks our door and runs to his bedside table, getting the gun and telling me to call 911 because he hears guys in our house. We both go into our bathroom, shut the door. I'm in the closet calling 911, and he's halfway in the closet doorway and halfway crouching behind our dresser with the gun pointed at the door. We're both shaking. I tell the 911 operator what is going on and our address. They say police are en route. While waiting, both my husband and I have the same thought. Earlier in the day, I had been on his computer. He's a gamer and has several monitors, working on lesson plans for when I went on my maternity leave on one monitor and watching the show Supernatural on the other. When my husband got home from work, I just paused the show and hung out with him. So, now we're hiding in the closet with a gun and wondering if one of our cats jumped on the desk and accidentally stepped on the keyboard and unpaused it. I tell the 911 operator all of this, and my husband decides to go listen at the door again.
He comes back, saying it's silent, and we were all like, what are the chances that a cat upsized the video and then paused it again? The 911 operator says, police have arrived, put our gun away, and meet them at the front door. As soon as we leave the bedroom, we see my giant Maine Coon cat straight up laying across the keyboard like a fat little asshole. Yep, we got the crap scared out of us, and 5 cop cars showed up at our house because my cat unpaused the computer. My husband now refers to that night as the night of the naked gun. Definitely not just a one-day thing, but my mom has been sick with quite a few immune disorders throughout my life starting when I was 7, and I got used to taking care of her because my dad was not the most sympathetic caregiver. Almost 2 years ago, while I was a sophomore in college, my mom got a mysterious illness that made it almost impossible for her to eat and keep anything down, and doctors couldn't figure it out for the longest time. I watched her, from far away, just get weaker and weaker and sicker. She lost over 50 pounds and was basically bedridden, wouldn't eat unless someone forced her to. She could only handle yogurt or protein shakes, and my dad was working full-time and didn't have the motivation to check in with her for every meal. I was stranded 4 hours from home, and I didn't have a car, so I could only call and hope she'd listen to me. I got to take care of her over winter break, but nothing was really helping. So the scariest thing was going back to my second semester of college that year, not knowing if my mom was still going to be alive when I got home next. I've never felt such an overwhelming and lingering feeling of helplessness. Luckily, the doctors figured out it was an overfiring of a nerve, I think in her throat, and the issue was fixed. She put weight back on and was able to eat again. But man, going months seeing your mom falling apart while you can do nothing from far away really, really sucks. She's my rock, and the person I admire most, and even just typing this is making me choked up again. Good news is, I got a new nickname out of the experience. She calls me her Beastmaster now, because I would call her multiple times a day and yell at her until she ate something. Got stalked by a cougar in Utah. Was visiting a family member. She wanted something from a neighbor and asked me to go and get it for her. She had a small child at the time. So I walked down the driveway, which is bordered on one side by woods and field on the other. Get to the road when I see a brown flash out of the corner of my eye. Walk down the road toward the neighbor's house, and as I get to the front porch, the guy answers the door, gets a horrified look on his face, and yanks me inside. I turn around to see a cougar standing less than 10 feet away. The idea that I could have been prey is absolutely horrifying. Someone broke into my apartment room when I was 22. He had a knife, but what terrified me was that he was heavily drunk. He was blocking the entrance, and I sat frozen in my bed for 15 minutes while trying to reason with him. I got lucky. When he turned his back to me for a moment, I mustered some courage, pushed him out, and locked the door. Most scarring experience of my life. Back in 2010, I was on a humanitarian deployment in South America and the Caribbean. We stopped in Port-au-Pau, Haiti, to provide some humanitarian relief to the local village. Me and about 30 other people were flown off my ship by helos. I was in the Navy, so me and the other Navy personnel were not armed while we were there, but we did have armed Marines that escorted us with M4s and M9s. The entire time we were walking through the village to get to where we needed to go, the locals were throwing rocks at us and shouting obscenities in French Creole. Eventually, we got to an area where the locals were a little friendly. Our supervisor told us that the area we were in was safe, and we could walk around, but only within a certain distance. I think it might have been less than half a mile, honestly. I'm walking around and handing out bottled water and MREs to some of the locals, and I'm approached by a seemingly friendly woman who was asking me to follow her because she wanted to show me something. I was young and dumb, and at the time, I followed her towards this small building. I knew better than to enter any building, so I told her that I was not allowed to go into the building. After I said this, she became very insistent and even grabbed my arm, trying to pull me in, which I resisted. I told her if I go in that my boss would be very upset. After I said this, I saw her swing the door open, and inside were 2 men standing with very large daggers. They were about the size of a machete, but shaped differently. I don't know what you would call them. After the door flung open, I felt a push behind me. A man was trying to push me through the door. My heart started beating so hard I thought it was going to shoot out of my chest. I did the only thing I think to do and throw my head backwards as hard as I could. I struck the man in the nose with the back of my head, which worked because he stopped pushing me and grabbed at his face with his hands. I immediately started sprinting back towards where the rest of my group was, only looking back a few times to see the woman, the 2 men with the daggers, and the man I busted in the nose taking off in the other direction. When I finally reached the rest of my group, I was visibly shaken and out of breath. One of the guys from my ship asked me what happened, but I was too afraid to tell him what happened because I technically broke the rules. I was specifically instructed to not venture anywhere alone, and I did just that, so I feared reprimand. I just told him I didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't until about a month later I told someone what happened. They told me I'm lucky to be alive, and that I should have told someone about it. Easily the scariest experience of my life. I'm pretty sure those men were going to slaughter me to send a message to the US they do not want us there. I worked at a college campus in the larger campus building where the theater was. It was a very old private college. I had heard rumors the person whom the building was named after haunts the premises. I didn't believe it. Anyway, one night, I was there basically alone and went to shut down everything and lock the doors. I got to the theater room and I got this weird sense to leave as soon as I walked in. I went down the hallway to turn off the lights and I caught a glimpse of something to my left. I looked up and clear as day, I saw a gentleman and a young boy sitting in the chairs, both dressed in 1800s clothing, looking at the stage. I stared for a moment and within a few blinks they were gone. I bolted, refused to go in there again at night to lock up. When my ex-husband snapped and tried to strangle me, he picked me up by my arms. I'm not a small girl and he's not that big, and threw me on the bed. In that moment, he knew he was going to kill me. He smiled a big smile, and his eyes turned completely black, no iris at all. That's when he began to choke me. Seeing that smile and his black eyes was terrifying. I was sure that was the last thing I was ever going to see. I was visiting family in Mexico, and they built a house next to their house. Me and my cousins went to tell horror stories to each other in the darkest room in that house. The house was completely empty, and the floors weren't finished. We closed the door to the room to make it darker and sat down in a circle on the floor. We started to tell horror stories. A few minutes passed, and it was going great. I suddenly heard a whisper in my ear and asked everyone if they could be quiet. We all heard footsteps going up the stairs. I decided to be the bravest one and opened the door. No one was there. We grabbed our things and ran out of the house as fast as possible. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. I had been binge watching in bed for maybe 5 hours. I was comfortable, too comfortable. I really needed to take a piss, but I was too indulged in my show. When I couldn't take it anymore, I jumped out of my bed and ran to the bathroom to relieve myself. Halfway through, my vision started getting blurry, and the next thing I knew I was dreaming, completely forgetting what just happened. While in my dream, I thought how weird it was. I don't remember going to bed, I thought, and that's when I noticed a sharp pain in my jaw. I woke up hunched over the toilet. My right hand was between my legs and in the water. My chin was resting on the back of the toilet, meaning it slammed on the top when I passed out. I started freaking out. The thought that I passed out and didn't know. I could have easily died if I fell in any other direction. Turns out that peeing and getting out of bed fast are a great combination to dramatically decrease one's blood pressure, so please, binge responsibly. One day, I was out exploring some country roads on this old Honda dirt bike that I just fixed up. Occasionally I would leave the road if I found a section without any barbed wire fence, which would usually lead to some open fields where I could have some fun and just do some general hooning. This was up in Kansas, so there was a good amount of open land. I followed this one little path through the trees that had been clearly driven down before. Maybe this will lead to some sweet trails, I thought. Nope. It ended up taking me to a huge field of marijuana. Score! I hightailed it the fuck out of there and scoped out the surroundings. It was clearly somebody's plot. As a broke college student and an avid partaker of said plants, I decided to plan a return in late September when it would be close to harvest time. I wasn't going to snag that much, just enough to enjoy for a little while. After all, there was at least 4 acres of the stuff. I know stealing is wrong. I was dumb. The time comes, and my roommate at the time drives me out there late at night, in this shitty little Hyundai accent. The plan was to drop me off and leave. I would run down the path and fill up a small grocery sack with buds, call him when I was ready, and he would be waiting where he dropped me off just as I was coming back out. He let me out, and I sprinted down the trail and finally reached the plants. I started snipping buds off the plants, and finally, my little plastic bag. Done. I started jogging back down the trail as I tried to call my friend. Nothing. Again, nothing. I had 0 service. I reached the road where he dropped me off, and I continuously tried to reach him as I walked down the middle of the road. I look off in the distance, and I could see 2 vehicles with a literal fuck ton of off-road lights hauling ass down the street perpendicular to the one I was walking down. My heart raced as I saw them turn down the road I was on. They had yet to see me, as the road was rather hilly and formed a crest between myself and the clearly pissed off drivers of the vehicles. It looked like the damn sun was going to rise over the hill in a hurry, and I sure as shit wasn't going to be standing there when it did. The only option of cover was to run off to the side of the road and hurl myself over a barbed wire fence. I did exactly that. As I lay in the ditch on the side of the road, bleeding from the gashes all up and down my body, camouflaged by the 2-foot-tall grass and ironically a few small little errant pot plants, I watched as 2 badass off-road trucks hauled ass past me. Looked like a mid-90s Silverado and a K5 Blazer. All the light bars, huge tires, all the fixins. Irrelevant. But I'm a car guy, so I pay attention to that sort of shit. Anyways, the first one pulls right off into the exact spot that I just came from, and the other one pulls left immediately across the street from the other guy. The first thing that went through my mind was that I tripped some deer camera or surveillance system. I could clearly see spotlights shining through the trees. They were aware someone had been there, and they were searching. I still could not reach my friend. I still had no service. Then I hear it. They start fucking shooting. Were they going to kill me? Did they kill my friend? I have nowhere to go. I'm bleeding all over, and I'm miles away from anything. This is literally the only time I've feared for my life. They must have fired off close to 100 rounds, so I knew they were just firing randomly to scare me off. I lay there for close to 10 minutes until I see headlights coming down the road. They could only be the dim, shitty headlights of my friend's Hyundai. I carefully maneuvered myself back through the barbed wire and waited for him to get closer. As he approached, I heard the farting sound of his leaking exhaust, and I felt so relieved. I jumped out in front of the car and stopped him. Thank God. I jumped in the car. Go, 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 go! I explained everything, as I prayed these dudes didn't see his car somehow while they were off looking for me. We were in just about the shittiest getaway vehicle possible. Once we got off the dirt roads, I knew we were safe. Everything went okay from then on, and eventually got back to our apartment. All of the gashes healed up eventually, but damn, that was absolutely terrifying. I managed to get a decent amount of buds, which we dried out and enjoyed for a good while. But was it worth it? Meh. 3 out of 10. Would not recommend. A friend and I were out late drinking and walked back to her dad's condo complex at 2 a.m. when the bars closed. We were almost there when a car pulled up, 2 guys, and asked us where the beach was. We were 4 blocks from the water, so we pointed in the right direction and told them they were only 4 blocks away. They pretended not to understand, so we repeated what we had said. They told us to get in the car and show them, and we replied with something along the lines of, no, we're good. Their tone changed, and they told us to get in the car, and the 2 of us started going back the other direction. They pulled their car into the driveway of the house that had been right in front of us, and we quickly hid between 2 houses. They got out of the car, and we heard things like, "Where the F did they go? Look around, find them." They were calling for us, and we were probably only 20 feet away, trying to figure out what to do. We hid for a short time, and then managed to sneak off through a side yard and went into her dad's condo complex through a back entrance. We got up to her dad's floor and went to an outside area and peeked out to see if they were still there. This was a good 10 to 15 minutes after we ran from them, and they were still there searching for us. They were both angry and riled up, spitting out a lot of expletives about how could we have just disappeared, etc., etc. We were somehow drunk enough that we never thought to call the police, but thank goodness we were sober enough to handle the situation. They left after 20 plus minutes of searching. Oh, and they were driving an older Volkswagen Bug. The Ted Bundy connection is not lost on me. 10 years later, and I still feel scared as shit thinking about what could have happened to us. When I was like 6, I was playing over my friend's house, drawing chalk on her driveway, when this white truck came speeding down the street and stopped almost in front of the driveway. The driver, and I can only guess either his wife or girlfriend, got out and started yelling about how lost they were and how it was the wife's fault or his fault. We're both scared, but didn't pay any mind since they were far away and it didn't have anything to do with us. Then the guy turns to us and says, "You 2 girls, do you know where Rose Street is?" Keep in mind my friend was like 5 and I was like 6, and the man was very aggressive, and being smart kids, we didn't answer him and just ran inside and told my friend's mom. Friend's mom, being a no-nonsense kind of woman, told us to stay in the dining room, handed us the phone, and told us to dial 911 in case something happened, and to say, "A mean man hurt mommy." Friend's mom went out to the driveway, didn't get much closer than a few feet, and called out to the man, "I understand you need directions to Rose Street." They didn't have a screen door, so we could hear everything. Yeah, I asked them 2 brats where it was, but they didn't answer me. Well, those 2 brats are my children. Exit this neighborhood, turn left, you'll see Rose Street. Best make yourself scarce. I better not find out you've been harassing children. If you don't, I won't hesitate to find you." The man huffed, and his girlfriend got back into his truck and left. Never saw them again. Friend's mom told us to stay inside for the rest of the afternoon and called my dad to come and pick me up. My friend's mom told my dad about the incident, and I never went back to her house until I was a senior in high school. I was still friends with her until I started college and lost touch. I guess looking back, it wasn't that scary, but it was scary enough for a 6-year-old. I was diagnosed with a tumor a few months back. After multiple tests and consultations, I went in to have surgery. I wasn't scared for surgery at all. It's not something that I was ever nervous about. But the moment when the nurse had to put the IV in me, I broke down from fear. At first, I was feeling kind of nervous, but once I realized I was going into surgery, it all hit me at once. I started crying and yelling at the nurses to let me go. I tried to get up and run away, but my body was paralyzed with fear. I've never felt that scared for my life ever. In that moment, I felt completely helpless. I felt like I couldn't do anything. I know that it doesn't seem so terrifying, but for me, I have never felt so much fear in my life. It's a feeling that I can never forget, and that moment runs through my head at least once a day. I combined 2 different drugs, Lexapro and Triptan, used for migraines without realizing they were both SSRIs, serotonin increasers, within the same 24-hour period. Wound up having a mild case of serotonin syndrome as a result, and I'm still traumatized. I couldn't move sometimes without feeling my heart rate go up. I was on the toilet several times a day because my kidneys couldn't regulate themselves. Some nights I would wake up, know that something was going to happen, and start shaking like I was having a panic attack, even though it wasn't one. I had my period the first week too, so it was just horrible all around. I barely ate, I couldn't work, and it got to a point where I lost a few pounds because all I was doing was laying in bed watching Netflix to distract myself. My mom wouldn't take me to the ER in the first day because she didn't want to wait or be late for work. At times she thought I was exaggerating, yet she told me that I could have had a heart attack the first day had the dose been significantly larger. I don't want to imagine what a larger dose could have done. This week marks 1 month since it happened, and the drugs are still working their way out of my system. They're almost gone, thankfully. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before, and now I'm overly aware of changes in my body, especially my heart rate. I feel nervous sleeping by myself, but now that I can't sleep with someone else next to me all the time, it's scary not knowing what's wrong with you and feeling helpless because you can't do anything except sit there and cry. TL, doctor, took 2 SSRI drugs in the same 24-hour period, which caused mild serotonin syndrome. I'm okay now, but still fucked up because of it. Reddit. What is the creepiest true story someone has ever told you? Part 3. A friend of mine told me when she was 13, she and her friend were at the mall and an older guy, 40 plus, started chatting them up and offered to buy them clothes. The girls went along and he bought them each about $100 worth of stuff. Then he wanted them to go back to his place to show him the clothes, and the girls ditched him. Hate to think what his plans were to recoup his investment. My mom, grandparents, aunt and uncles, and several of their neighbors all swear they saw a UFO hover over my grandparents' house in the late 1960s. They said it just hung over the backyard, silently spinning, except for a faint whizzing sound for a minute or two with all sorts of colors in a ring. My mom and grandma said they remember the television and radio in the living room turning on full blast, getting transmissions and broadcasts from other countries in other languages, and appliances in the kitchen were rattling. My uncle said it was hanging right outside his bedroom window on the top floor, and that he was too scared to move, just stood by his window, staring. Another time, I'm pretty sure I saw a UFO with my mom behind our house about 10 years ago. Our backyard is basically a mile of farmland, and there was a bright, white light bouncing in the middle of the field, and then it just shot up and was gone. TL, DR, aliens are probably stalking my mom. My friend's dad was checking up on his daughter late at night, seeing if she was asleep. When he poked his head through her door, he saw that she was standing at the window looking out at the view. He said, "Honey, are you okay? Why don't you go to bed?" And he hears a reply from under the bed sheets saying, "Dad, I'm already in bed." He looks over at the bed and there's his daughter. Looks back over the window and no one's there. When I was a kid, we moved into a new house. My earliest memory was that my brother's room was always cold, but I never thought anything of it. When I got older, I moved into that room, but it wasn't cold anymore. I asked my mom why the room was so cold, and she told me that when we first moved in, my sister actually took that room and she had a lot of nightmares, and when she woke up, there were bruises up her legs and stomach. My mom would also get nightmares of a woman telling her to leave the house. She did a ritual or something and everything stopped, including the room not being cold anymore. A few years later, my sister was getting married. My grandma and 3 female cousins I never met before came to stay at our place. My mom told me that grandma did not like staying at our place because she would always get sick when she visited. My 3 cousins stayed in my sister's room, and after the second night they were here, they were really scared and said that someone was trying to open their door. They kept seeing the doorknob jiggle, and when they opened it, no one was there. They came to my room and asked if they can sleep in there, and I thought they were trying to scare me, but I played along. I slept on the floor, and they took my bunk bed, and suddenly I hear the washer turn on. The washer room was next to my room, and I went out there and turned it off. Then I went back to my room, and outside my door, I hear chains dragging across the room, but when I opened the door, no one was there. This really freaked me out, because for all the years I lived here, nothing ever happened. I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I went to my sister's room to check things out because I was curious. When I opened the door, I saw 2 things that freaked me out. There were these faint black marks on the ceiling like footsteps, and the windows were open. What's so scary about the window being opened? Someone installed the second glass of the windows wrong, so it could only be open from the outside. We lived on the 2nd floor, and it was impossible to open unless you had a ladder. It freaked me out for a while, and when everyone left, nothing weird happened. I talked to my mom about it afterwards, and she said that the house doesn't like new people and females. This explained why I never saw or experienced anything except for the cold room, and why my grandma always got sick. After that, once in a while, when I was sleeping, I would sometimes hear a baby crying. I assumed it was my neighbor's baby, but never thought anything of it. When we moved out, my mom forced me to go say bye to all of our neighbors, even if I never talked to them. When I said bye to the family next door that had the baby crying, I asked how the baby was doing, and they said they don't have a baby. About 7 years after I moved away from the house, I went back to visit. When I went to my room, it had changed a lot, and it was bigger. I asked the current owner why it was bigger, and they said that the closet that used to be in my room had a hidden space behind it, making the closet twice the size. I asked them if they found anything in there, and they said no. I don't know if it had anything to do with all the weird stuff I saw, but it was just another weird thing I learned about that house years later. As a boy, I was deathly afraid of the dark. I'm still always alert when I'm traversing the darkness. One time I woke up in the middle of the night to see 2 eyes floating in the darkness in the corner of my room, like a dog's eyes in the dark. Thinking it was my dog, I shout to him, "Buster, come here, boy." It just sat there. "Buster, come on." Nothing. "Buster, come here right fucking now." Nothing. Scared shitless, I lean forward for the light switch, turn on the light, and I'm alone in my room. I slept on my couch for about 1.5 years afterwards. Okay, this is going to get buried, but this is a legit creepy story involving a jar of hearts. My high school teacher told us a story about his friend living in rural Arkansas. He, the friend, meets a girl at the Walmart register. They talk and hit it off pretty well. She's a nice religious girl, exactly like the one he wanted to be with. They exchange numbers. He calls. They have long conversations deep into the night. They go on dates. She's a genuinely nice girl. She ended every phone conversation with a prayer, "We thank our Father," or something like that. The guy is completely smitten. She finally calls him to come to her house at 7:30 one Saturday night. She tells him to come there at exactly 7:30 and not a minute later. She says that if he is even a minute late, she will break up with him. The guy was a Little League baseball coach and had a game on that day. The game was supposed to end a few hours before that, so he accepted the offer. On the day of the game went into overtime, or whatever you call it in baseball. It went on longer than expected. The dude, coach, was getting a little nervous, but he still had plenty of time. The game ended a little late, but 3 of the kids' parents hadn't arrived yet, and he had to drop them off at home. Panicking, he really doesn't want to miss his chance with the nice girl. He tells them to hop into the car and speeds off. After quickly dropping off the first 2 kids, he decides the 3rd kid's house is too far off, so he leaves him on the road and begs him to go walk home. Yeah, very douche move, I know. He rushes home, showers, gets dressed in a hurry, and tries to go to the girl's house ASAP. He arrives at her house at 7:35, 5 minutes late. A woman in her mid-40s comes out and tells him, "Clarice, the nice girl who called him over, said you were late and wants you to go away. Leave." Dejected, he goes back home. A few days, or rather the next day I think, later, he sees the local news. He sees the house and it looks familiar. It is the girl's house. The police are leading a handcuffed woman out of the house. It is the 40-year-old woman that had spoken to him earlier. Behind her is the girl he was dating. He was shocked, as the headline read, "Child Kidnappers," or something like that. He expected the police to visit him soon as well, because he was dating the girl. Soon, as expected, a police officer comes to his house and asks him if he is named. The guy is nervous, but knows his rights. He asks if he should get a lawyer or not. The policeman tells him that he is not legally allowed to tell him what happened, but felt a moral obligation. This is where the story gets creepy. The policeman says the women arrested were engaging in human sacrifice. In their house, they found the missing children's remains. There was blood all over the walls and jars of hearts labeled with the names of the missing kids. There was an empty jar that had the dude's name on it. Turns out, the girl invited him on a date at her house at 7:30 to kill him in a ritual human sacrifice. The ritual apparently had to be executed with precise timing. His being late saved him from being ritually sacrificed. Needless to say, there are some crazy cults in rural Arkansas. I have a story to share. This is not something that happened to a friend's friend. It happened directly to me. When I was young, I was intrigued by the paranormal, as I suppose everyone was. I outgrew it, of course, and unfortunately. Once in summer, I was probably 17 years old. Me and some friends were hanging out in the beach at night with some 14-year-olds, maybe younger, who felt like sharing scary stories. I had outgrew the phase. I was bored as fuck, so I just kept saying stupid shit all night, provoking spirits and demons. There was a guy much older than all of us who cried when I started screaming, "Satan, this guy's body will host your spirit in 10, 9, 8, 7, countdown," which was pretty funny. Anyway, there is this expression in Greece, like, "May Mother Mary be with you." So late in the morning, as we are standing up and about to part our ways, I said, "Good night, guys. May Satan be with you." And that's when something slapped me really hard. I turned around to slap my friend, thinking he was the one who did. Nope. He was a couple of meters away from me. Then a second slap. Then many sleepless nights, and me shutting the fuck up ever since. I had nightmares or woke up scared at something almost every night when I was like 5 or 6. Then it suddenly stopped. I was talking to my mom years later, and she tells me that she sprayed holy water around my room, and then they stopped. She was dead serious. It still freaks me out. I live in a really, really rural place, so it's not uncommon to have really long stretches of road with absolutely no civilization at all. No lights, no other cars, no nothing for miles and miles. One night, my friend was driving back from a bonfire party in the desert when she said she saw just looked like a guy walking along the side of the road. She could see him moving way up ahead of her, and as she got closer, she started to notice that the way he was moving was very unusual. His arms seemed too long, and she described his gait to me as nothing she'd ever seen a human being do. She said it was like he was constantly staggering but never falling over. She told me that as she got close enough to pass him, she just knew that she didn't want to see this person or thing's face. She turned her rearview mirror away from her, drove by as fast as she could, and didn't look back. She called me later to tell me about this. She was actually really creeped out because the person/thing had been heading in the direction of our town. My friend told me this about a month or so after his mom passed away. She died of a heart attack while she was taking a walk out in their back garden. No suspicious circumstances or anything. Everything was normal around their house for about a month. Then, my friend swears that strange things started happening. The garden where she died just seemed to stop being healthy. All the plants just died, even though they were still being watered on a somewhat normal basis. And to add to the strange noises could be heard throughout the house, and sounds of things being knocked over. One night, he was woken up by one of these noises, so he walked from his room to the kitchen to get a drink of water and to try and set his head straight. When he came around the corner, he swears he saw his mother standing at the stove cooking something, and he said you could smell it. The ghost of his mom, or her apparition, or whatever, turned around and looked at him and smiled. He started to back away, and he wanted to scream and run, but he just couldn't bring himself to do that. The ghost walked out of their back door onto their deck and beckoned him to follow. He did. The ghost walked out to their back garden, back to where his mother was found. He stood there and just watched it for a few minutes. The ghost stood on the exact spot for about 10 minutes, and this whole time, my friend was being quiet and trying not to shit his pants. Eventually, this apparition went away. My friend stuck around for a few minutes after just to be safe. Afterwards, he went back inside and tried to fall back asleep. The next morning, he just thought he had a bad nightmare. He went outside to the spot in the garden where the ghost had been / his mother had died, and on the exact spot where the ghost had stood for the 10 minutes was growing a group of about 5 roses, one for each member of their family, he claims. My friend, his sister, his older brother, their father, and one for the dog. I at first didn't believe him, that is, until he sent me a picture of the group of roses surrounded by all the dead plants. I wish I still had the picture, but this ordeal took place almost half a year ago. Still gives me chills when I think about it. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for him. The one with the Japanese businessman who can't work out why stuff in his house keeps moving. Little things like stuff in the fridge being in different places or seats not quite left pushed in all the way. The weird thing was it wasn't happening while he was at work. The thing would be different when he woke up from when he went to sleep. Figuring he was sleepwalking or something, it got pretty bad and was getting to I need to see a shrink levels. He set up a camera to record his apartment. The first day, he comes home from work and nothing is shown on his video. He goes to bed. When he wakes up, he reviews the tape. He watches as out of the closet that is right next to his PC desk, a girl in dirty clothes comes out, wanders around the house, eats some food and drinks some water from the tap. All of this happening whilst he was asleep in the next room over. Then, just when he is thoroughly creeped the fuck out, he watches as this girl walks back into the closet, and then he sees himself getting out of bed on the tape. She was in the closet whilst he watched and discovered her existence. Google turns up the news article that goes with this. Pleasant dreams. Preface, not mine. Read this in another thread, and if anyone knows the story I'm referring to and can find a link, that'd be great. It was an Ask Reddit thread about the strangest thing that had happened to you or something. Anyway, the guy talks about being a kid growing up in a normal middle American family, loving mom and dad, siblings, dogs, all that shit. So, one night he has a dream where he is being chased by something, ghost maybe, and in the dream finds his father and jumps into his arms for comfort. As he looks up into his father's face, he sees not his father, but the face of some sort of gorilla with no skin, just an ape's face, grinning down at him with muscle and bone exposed. This is how I recall the story. If the original poster gets unearthed and I skewed some of the details, I beg your pardon. So okay, the kid has this nightmare, wakes up all sweaty and piss scared. Great. That morning over breakfast, the kids look at his dad, who smiles at him, putting him at ease. This part of the OP I remember almost verbatim, and remains the eeriest part for me. That was the last time I saw my father as the man I knew and loved. After that, he turned into a monster. From then on, the story details about how OP's father over the next summer began a pattern of abuse that would ruin their family. Summed up, the guy turned into a controlling sociopath who dominated the family and others, creating a cult. OP goes on about how terrible it was growing up in that environment, and how he managed to escape once he reached adulthood or something like that. So yeah, obligatory, sorry for the wall of text, hope someone can find the thread I'm referring to. True or not, it remains one of the most chilling stories I've ever come across. My grandma told me that back in the 1970s, she was looking to buy this old Victorian house in Liverpool, England, and on their way up to the second floor, when she stood on this one certain step on the staircase, she would feel completely overcome with emotions. She said that when she stepped on it, she felt nauseated but peaceful and a sad kind of happiness. This happened every time that she went up that staircase on that exact step. Later on, when the realtor was telling her some of the history of the house, she told her that a nun died on the staircase. Her body was found lying on that specific step. Me and my buddy went hiking pretty late one night, right before sunset. We decided to travel up a hill to explore, and as we were hanging out up on the hill, it began to rain. I'm not talking about regular rain. It felt like we were in a fucking hurricane. Anyways, we decided to start heading back because the sun was going down, and it was already hidden by rain clouds. As we traveled down the hill, we thought we heard footsteps behind us but just assumed it was the storm. We realized we had been going down the hill the wrong way, and by the time we made it back down to the trail, it was totally dark and creepy. We continued to walk on the trail back to my car. that's when we started to feel like we were getting hunted. The rain had calmed down by now, so we could hear things around us better. We could hear twigs snapping and footsteps, multiple footsteps. Still not sure if it was people or mountain lions. We noped out of there pretty fast. That's when it got really creepy. As we dried off and sat in my car and started recounting our epic journey, we both noticed a man just sitting in his car, which was down the street from us by about 20 feet. We didn't see him in the car when we walked past it, and we didn't see anyone approach the car since we got in ours. From our view, he appeared to just be sitting there and staring straight at our car. His head wasn't down like he was reading or anything. After about 10 minutes of us just staring at my mirrors, watching this guy sit in his car, he turned on his headlights. After about 10 more minutes, he slowly drove off. Okay, on the subject of demon-related stories, I'm an atheist, but this is creepy. My uncle is the pastor of a church in Oklahoma, and one of his closest buddies is a youth minister in a church in a neighboring town. He has a wife and one daughter. Every Saturday morning, when his daughter was younger, around 5, 6 or so, she and his wife would get up really early and cook breakfast. One morning, the daughter saw the kitchen light turn on from her room and heard some of the pots and pans being moved around. And she thought, why is my mom making breakfast without me? So she got up and went to check. But it was about 4 a.m. and no one was in the kitchen and all the lights were off. She went to her parents' room and asked, Mommy, why did you try to start breakfast without me? Her mom thought it has been in her head in the kitchen making some noise. So she woke up her husband, my uncle's friend, thinking someone was in the house. He grabbed an old aluminum baseball bat and walked into the dark house. He checked the kitchen and besides some pots and pans being out, nothing seemed too greatly disturbed. Next to the kitchen is a reading room with a couch and a rocking chair. When he walked in there, he could barely make out the rocking chair, which is rapidly rocking with no one sitting in it. He jumped back frightened and grabbed a Bible sitting on the shelf and screamed, "In the name of Jesus, leave my house." And the chair instantly halted. Nothing like that ever happened again. I'm not a believer, but nonetheless, creepy-ass story. My sister teaches 3rd grade at a school with a lot of lower-income kids. These are their stories. One of her students, normally a very good student, suddenly started having problems staying awake in class. Concerned, my sister approached her at recess and asked her what was wrong. She wouldn't say. My sister eventually brought it up with one of the other teachers. This woman knew the family a little more personally. She told my sister what she'd heard. The little girl in question was pretty serious, never made up weird stories for attention, never lied about stupid things like other kids her age. But this girl one day began to complain to her mother that every night a young girl with dirty hair and dirty fingernails would come out of her closet and play with her toys. Her mother had been getting onto her recently about not putting her toys away at night, after she found them still out the next morning. But this young girl insisted that she had, and that the dirty girl in her closet had taken them out again. Every night, the door would open slowly, and the dirty girl would emerge with her toys, and my sister's student would hide under her covers and listen. That terrifies the shit out of me already. But my sister heard one more thing, which came from the girl's father. One night, the family had come home from a movie past the girl's usual bedtime. Everyone had said goodnight and gone straight to bed. Shortly after, the girl had knocked on her parents' door, sobbing and shaking, and asked to sleep with them. Apparently, when she had gone into her room and turned on the light, she found the dirty girl asleep in her bed. When I was 11 or so, my friend died, Dee. I lived in a duplex, which is what Canadians call a house that's divided in two. Dee lived on the other side and was the oldest of 3 or 4 kids. I was also the oldest in my family. Eventually, I moved across town. We read in the newspaper that some 11-year-old died on our old street. I didn't imagine for a second it was him, but a few days later, we got a phone call. It was really icy in the winter. It would snow a few times, then that snow would just stay there like slippery tundra. On roads, sidewalks, lawns, you had to want in a very particular way not to slip, which you would do a few times each winter, usually in front of schoolmates. There was a younger kid next door that I didn't know as well. He fell on a nail once when his parents went out and they had asked my mom to watch him, so we had to take him to the hospital. Other than that, I just remember he was a quiet, honest kid. It turns out that they were walking to school. There was a 4-lane road that they had to cross, a pretty busy one. As they walked up to the crosswalk, they were horsing around. Dee was the bigger one and shoved my other neighbor. He shoved back, but due to the ice, Dee went onto the road and was nailed by a truck and died instantly. The spooky bit was when the surviving neighbor said he saw Dee at his front door wearing no shoes. Apparently, they buried him with no shoes, and a few people knew that. I don't believe any of it, but gosh, that kid must still feel guilty. I blame ICE, Canada, and ICE.
What is your own ghost story? Not my personal experience, but my little brother. When he was about 5 or 6, he suddenly started talking to himself when he was playing in his room. Eventually, we asked him who it was he was talking to, thinking it was an imaginary friend. My stepdad didn't believe in ghosts and all that until he told us who he was talking to. Amanda. Amanda was my stepdad's cousin that died from cancer when she was only 12. The last place she was at other than the hospital was our old property. Another incident with Amanda happened while me and my brother were at school and my mom was at work. My stepdad was watching TV in the living room and all the animals were in the room with him. He had just finished cleaning up my brother's toys and putting them in the box in the corner of his room. There was a loud clattering sound from my brother's room and my stepdad went to check it. The box of toys was upside down in the middle of the room, all of the toys still in the box. The animals couldn't have possibly done it because they were all with him, and let's be real, they are capable of doing such a thing. He later on told us that's something only Amanda would do. I refuse to mention or talk about these experiences around him because it hits him hard. The way he describes her, she was a sweet and childish girl that just wanted to have fun. I never had any encounters with her, but she was my brother's best friend. He eventually stopped seeing her and told us she didn't want to make Andy sad anymore, so she went away. I cried thinking about this. Rest in peace, Amanda. In my old room, when I'm completely still and it's absolutely quiet, I would hear weeping, like someone is crying. It was barely audible, and the source of the noise was the corner where my bed was. I thought it was my mom or someone else in the house, but I went outside and saw her asleep on the couch, watching TV with the volume low. It didn't make sense, but a year later I moved my bed to the other side of the room. I woke up one early morning, and I saw the side profile of a woman floating an inch off the ground where the bed used to be. She hovered from left to right, and all I remember was seeing her in a white veil, like a wedding dress almost, and she had brown skin like she was African American. I saw her hands at her side, but I couldn't make out any features on her face, like she didn't have one or it was too blurry to see. She was only visible for about a little over a second as she floated from left to right. She was slightly translucent, like if you set the opacity in Photoshop to 80%, and had a very mild glow to her, just so that she was slightly brighter than her surroundings. I always thought I would freak out or have the biggest fright of my life if I ever saw an actual entity, but when I saw whoever that was, I didn't feel any fear at all. It seemed natural, like she was just passing by and wanted nothing to do with me. I sensed no bad intentions. I lived in that house for over 17 years and only saw an entity like that once ever. I considered myself to be an atheist when I was younger, but that encounter has made me acknowledge that there's something out there that we may or may not have all the answers to. I had a really strange experience at my grandma's house one time. I used to take care of her full time. I had brought her back home from dialysis treatment and she was having a particularly bad day, so I figured I would make her a cake. As she napped, I quietly made this fully piped and decorated masterpiece of a cake. I thought a cake this nice should go in a container with the snap on it so it would be perfect when she woke up. So I set the container directly in the middle of the kitchen table, clamped on top, and waited for her to wake up so I can put her in the wheelchair and move her to the living room. Finally, she's awake. I walk in her room and tell her I've got a surprise for her in the kitchen. She excitedly sits up and is ready to go. As I begin to pick her up to put her in the wheelchair, I hear a loud bang. I run into the kitchen, leaving her behind, and see the top of the snap on the container rolling around on the floor. I run around the house and do a sweep to make sure the doors are all still locked and no one is in the house. It's apparent that it's all clear. I come back and look at the cake. It's completely untouched and I'm stunned. She hollers for me and I bring her into the kitchen and tell her the entire situation. She then proceeded to tell me that she saw a ghost all of the time and personally recognized him as her grandfather, which explained the hard-soled footsteps I would hear at night and large handprints on my mirror when I showered. I still to this day have no idea how a ghost could unsnap a cake container and throw the lid on the floor without touching the cake. It's not very exciting, but I used to live in a house where most of the doors couldn't be locked because the keys were lost when we got there. That includes my room's door. One day, after I took a bath, I went to my room to dress up, and when I went out the door, it was locked. At that moment, I just thought my brothers were making some joke and ended up leaving through the window. But it turned out no one did anything, and we had to break the lock so that the door could be opened again. No one could explain it, so we just pretended it never happened and didn't talk about it again. Oh, I've been waiting to tell this one. It's 2016. Summer vacation in South Africa, and I'm 15. I'm hanging out with two friends from my hometown on the daily, one a girl, one a boy. One day, we decide to sleep over at the girl's house and have a movie night. The girl's mother used to be married to one of the most famous Afrikaans singers in South Africa, Worsie Visser, who tragically died in a plane crash in 1998. So, we watch some comedies and it gets late, and we start heading to bed. We are sitting in the room, me and my male friend are sleeping in and talking until around 1 when he realizes that his phone is still in the living room. He begs me to go get it, and I just decide I'll do it, whatever, right? So I step out into the hallway, into the living room, and it's dark. There's this little stool thing right as you step into your right, and the phone is on it, so I bend down to pick it up. As I look back, I think I see a little blonde boy with a red shirt and jean shorts on. I stare at it, trying to make out what I'm really seeing because there isn't supposed to be a boy here, right? As I'm still trying to process what's in front of me, I hear a hello, and as soon as the sound enters my ears, I get the biggest shiver of my life and just turn around and bolt into the room and explain what I saw. Of course, they don't believe me and laugh it off. Next morning comes around and I tell the lady's husband, girl's dad, and he just said something along the lines of it's his time of year again. A few years later, and I bring it up to my mother again. She tells me this lady has complained to her about Worsie bugging her when she's alone in her house. She's told stories when she's walking around the house and sees him laying on the couch, and she just doesn't even mind him. I wish I knew this before I went to sleep over, but I know what you're thinking. No, I never slept over there again. One time in college, my two other roommates were out of town, and I was getting ready to go to bed. It was very late/early into the morning. I closed my room's door and turned the lights off. As I'm getting in bed, there are 3 distinctive knocks on my bedroom door. I immediately get goosebumps, something I never get. I jumped up and turned my bedroom light on and opened my door quickly. Nothing was there, just a dark, empty house. Creeps me the F out until this day. I used to work at one of the most haunted places in Ontario, Fort George National Historic Site, for 5 seasons between school. I had never believed it because plenty of times I've been there at night and nothing odd ever happened. My last season working there, I stayed on until the winter. I'm sitting in the blockhouse, soldiers' barracks, 15 minutes into opening. I'm by myself and it's slow, rainy October day, about midweek. Above me, I hear footsteps loud and prominent, not out of the ordinary. We have stuff upstairs for a field trip program we occasionally use. It's off limits usually, but often enough curious people take a look. Anyway, the footsteps are going across the building toward the stairs on my side of the blockhouse, so I go to the base of the steps to shoo off the visitors and it's pitch dark up there. And I call up, "Sir, ma'am, that area is off limits right now. If you come down here, I'd love to give a tour of the barracks for you." I get no answer. A bit more shaky, I call back again, still no answer. I take a few steps up the stairway, just enough to see up there, and I see nothing, no light, no people, nothing. I'm shook. I leave the blockhouse and sit outside for the next hour. Nobody came out, and there are only 2 doors to the building and I would see anybody leaving. I asked my coworkers if anybody was playing a joke on me. They didn't know, as all are older people that I didn't think would anyway. I also learned that no visitors were in the fort yet either. Turns out after asking around, I'm not the first to experience this. There's a known ghost that does that on rare occasion. Nobody has seen them, but it has been reported before. I was a skeptic before this, but nothing logical would have made those footsteps. TL, doctor. I worked in an old 1812 fort and heard footsteps. So, a few weird events have happened in my house ever since a family member of mine, my cousin, passed away in 2013. My family genuinely thinks it's him messing with us like he would when he was alive. Small things happen like doors closing or opening alone, stuff going missing and reappearing, loud man footsteps when no one else is home, and other truly inexplicable events. Anyway, We have a pool table in the living room, and I swear, I absolutely promise, I heard the billiard balls move on their own as if someone was playing. It was quick, only for a second, and it was loud. We were all in the same room, the kitchen, eating dinner, when we heard the noise from the pool table. I go to look, there's obviously no one in that room, and we all just kind of look at each other like, what the fuck just happened? I've never gotten such intense goosebumps. Somebody, possibly my late cousin, was playing pool. Another time, I'd say a year or more ago, I was in my room with my best friend, and we're talking shit, doing our makeup, whatever. The door to my bathroom is slightly open. Sometime later, I see it a little less than slightly open, but still noticeably open. None of us had been to the bathroom in that time we were talking, so her and I start paying attention to it. Let me mention, and keep in mind, this door has to be forced closed, physically shoved. It cannot slam close, and in all my years of living in that house, since I was in pre-K, I'm 20 now, the AC has never pushed the door closed. The AC wasn't even on, actually. Well, we're watching the door, and all of a sudden the door slammed shut. That shit closed all by itself in front of our faces. She screams, and we go to run out of the room. My best friend has been terrified of that bathroom ever since. This is definitely the type of thing my cousin would have done while he was alive. He loved messing with us. I miss him. He was definitely more of a big brother to me than a cousin, but it's comforting to think he's still here in some way, watching over the family. When I was little, I was going to bed, and the light in my room was odd. I could see the warm glow of the hallway light streaming in through the door and my silhouette on the ground. However, it's a room, it had an odd white flickering light to it. My body froze at the door, but I was curious and poked my head around the corner. There was a human figure about 5.5 feet tall, walking about a foot off the ground and wreathed in the white and black of television static. My mind screamed run, but my body was still locked in place. It had taken 2 steps towards me before I was finally able to utter the word, and my legs kicked in, curled up in my dad's lap for the rest of the night. Short version. I sold manufactured homes in some parks across South LA area. The park maintenance man told me a house just became vacant, so I went to see it. They sell like hotcakes in the expensive home market of CA. I got my passkeys, opened the back door, into the mudroom, opened the kitchen door. It was ice cold. I held my hand up to the ceiling AC vent. Strange. No cold air coming out, as I wondered what. A short old lady, maybe 5 foot tall. My ex-wife was 5 foot, so I knew 5 feet pretty well. White hair, blue spring dress, and a fluffy old lady apron. She looked mad too. I stood still and realized I could see right through her, to the counter behind. Oh God, I thought. She angrily said, "This is my house. What are you doing in here?" "I'm leaving." I started to walk across the kitchen to the dining area towards the living room exit door. She started to fade away the further we got from the kitchen. I opened the living room door and got out. I went straight to the main office. They asked me what happened. "What do you mean?" I said, "Your face is pale white. The light came on and one of the office people, did you just go to blank?" "Yes," I said. One lady screamed, "You saw her ghost?" "Why did you go in there? She just died. The ambulance just left." I calmed down, went back to the mobile home. The AC was not on. The circuit breaker was off. There were even spider webs on the outside of the breaker box. No one had been in there for a while. And I locked the place up and said to myself, I just saw a real ghost today. What would have happened if I had tried to stay in the home with an angry ghost? I don't want to find out. And I did sell that home a few weeks later. My house as a kid, I would hear violins from the closet and see faces on the ceiling. My mom's boyfriend came over one day. He was native and very in tune with spirits. He came in, said he could sense my dad, took 2 more steps, and said something was evil. He refused to come in. He walked around to the backyard. My house now, I've woken up feeling someone sitting at the foot of my bed. There will even be an indent in the mattress. I've also heard giggling in my basement. I would always feel like I was being watched, and one night I was blackout dreaming, seeing nothing but black but could only hear things, and I could hear a soft female voice whispering in my ear. I couldn't understand it, and I wasn't scared, but I felt like I was on morphine because it was so calming. When I woke up, I could hear it start fading and then disappeared along with the calm atmosphere. I felt empty inside afterwards for some reason, still strange to this day, and nothing strange ever happened since. Obligatory not my story, but my grandmother's. She grew up in an older 3-bedroom house in the early 70s. Well, once in a while, as a teenager,
she would see an older man outside in the swing area of their backyard. She never approached him, he never approached her. No one else had ever seen him, but her mother, my great-grandmother, thought it to be their uncle who had recently passed. One night, when my grandmother was laying in bed, she looked up to see the older man standing in her room, looking at her intently. He wouldn't leave and just stood there for several minutes. Once he was gone, she went to bed, only to wake up in the middle of the night to a house fire. The fire had started, they said, near an outlet in her bedroom, the same outlet the older man was standing at that very night. The entire family believed the man was warning them of the fire that was going to happen, though it didn't work and they lost everything in the home. Fast forward many years later, my grandmother is now in her 50s and her mother has since passed. That little shit confessed to catching the curtains on fire with a box of matches and leading their family to believe in this ghost's attempted heroic intervention. I lived in a Jewish house that was bombed during the Blitz. On several nights, I have seen what appears to be a little girl phantom in the hallway, and my dreams there were always about hearing the World War II bombing raid sirens followed by a blinding light. After some Googling, I found out that a Jewish family had died inside the house during World War II, so that was pretty freaky. Haunted house, for sure. In the month before my granddad passed away earlier this year, him and my grandmother had been seeing full-body apparitions around their home, mainly at night. She even described one as wearing 50s era clothing. 2 weeks after he passed, I spent the night over. It was just after 11 p.m. Me and my grandmother were asleep when we hear a woman say what sounded to us like Bud, my granddad's nickname, or Barb, my grandmother's shortened name only used by her friends or adult family. I would have brushed this off as my grandmother until I called out for her, and she asked me if I heard it too. A couple days later, she saw her mother, who passed on my first birthday of all days, aged 103, standing at the foot of her bed. She had only one other encounter since, but it's almost quieted down since his passing. Have you ever not slept for so long that you started hallucinating? What was your experience? Yeah. After 70 hours or so, it's pretty disorienting and rational thinking starts to get very slow. The hallucinations are not realistic, but are more like gaps in your vision that are shaped like things. Might see a silhouette at a distance or briefly around a corner. Very difficult to function in this state. Would not recommend. After a while, I start to become seriously paranoid and I start hearing voices and things like that. It's not very fun. I have some serious issues with sleep, and sometimes it will get to the point where I will start seeing things out of the corners of my eye that aren't actually happening, and I manage to scare the shit out of myself. Please get enough sleep. Don't fall into the habit of staying up for days on end. The longer you stay up, the harder it is to fall asleep. A buddy of mine landed a painting job working inside of a big commercial building, and he basically stayed in the place for 6 days straight, smoking crystal meth and painting to meet his deadline and avoid hiring a crew to help him. On the 6th day, the building caught fire, and he ran into the lobby and was pulling people out into the streets and yelling to call 911. The firemen showed up and couldn't locate a fire because there was none. He was hallucinating. During exam week, I pulled 3 all-nighters in the library between tests. The library was open 24 hours, so I'd just stay up all night making note cards, then go take an exam during the day. I lived off campus and didn't want to spend the gas money. I'd go to the most isolated area, but the library would pretty much be cleared out by midnight. I started to see glimpses of people, and I thought it was a bunch of students fucking with me, but there was no one on that floor. I thought the lights went off at some point, and maybe it was a sensor, so I started jumping around to reactivate it, but obviously it was light the whole time. Ex-addict was driving home after a 3-day meth bender, needed food, so drove into a McDonald's drive-thru. When asked for my order, I replied, "McChicken meal, please." Then they asked me again, and I said, "McChicken meal, please." Then they asked me again, and I was like, "Can't you fucking hear me? McChicken meal." And that's when I realized I wasn't actually saying anything. I was just replying in my head. I hadn't slept for about 72 hours. When I went to the ER, Doc gave me Ambien. I go home, get in bed, and take one. A few minutes later, the floor was covered in water and the walls were melting. It was raining outside, and the water on my windows was marching in formation. I've never known whether that was sleep deprivation or the effects of Ambien. I've never taken another.
I suffered from horrific insomnia about 12 years ago. I was on Lexapro, and one of the side effects is insomnia. At the time, that wasn't well documented, so I tried everything from Ambien to alcohol so I could sleep. I would usually get about a 3-hour nap at most before being awake again. I would go 3 to 5 days without sleeping. Eventually, I hit the point of desperation and start recreational substances to try and knock myself out. There were several occasions of hallucinations, but the one that sticks out is truly terrible. I was on day 6 without sleeping at least 5 hours. I was laying in bed, and a friend came in to start talking with me. We had many great conversations since our friendship began, but hadn't talked in a while at that point. I told him how bad I was struggling, and that honestly, killing myself would have been easier. He said he felt the same way many times, but that it was a terrible idea, and I knew how badly it had messed up his family. When I looked at him, he was a bloody mess on the side of his face, jaw ripped apart, teeth missing, but talking to me like nothing was wrong. He had been dead for a few years at that point, suicide, shot himself in his garage after years of substance abuse, and I just had a 3-hour conversation with a hallucination of a dead friend. I ended up switching meds to Celexa, and my sleep issues disappeared within a month. So, OP, if you are having sleeping issues, please go see a doc. It's a dark place that damn near took me. I stayed up for 3 days straight when I was 17. On the 3rd day, I kept hearing people call my name as if they wanted to ask me a question. It didn't help that I also thought it would be a good idea to go to school that day. Multiple times a day, I would bolt upright and look around to see who wanted my attention, only to see my fellow students huddled over their work. It got worse as the day went. My friends were a little worried about how weird I was acting. I walked home after school, listening to my headphones as usual, but I still kept hearing someone call my name. The music made it worse. Whatever I was hearing was already kind of muffled, and having a song playing in my ears only seemed to obscure it more. When I finally got home, I told my mom I wasn't feeling well, went to my room, and went straight to sleep at 4 in the afternoon. As I nodded off, I heard that voice calling for me again, making me jerk out of my sleep. This repeated a couple of times until I convinced myself that I already told my mom I was sick, and if she really needed me, she could come get me. I finally went to sleep and didn't wake until 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, and then went to sleep afterwards until 9 a.m. the next day. I was an idiot. I had really bad sleep problems for years. At one point, I went to a party having been awake for 36 hours when arriving. I didn't really hallucinate also because I couldn't sleep, but when I finally did, I got the sleep I needed. The problem was mostly falling asleep. For me, stress and lack of sleep triggers some form of sleep paralysis, and these weird dreams where I'm lying down somewhere and I can't see properly, and I can't get up because everything is just so blurry and spinning around. It made me wake up in cold sweats, and I remember once waking up and falling back asleep so many times because I was too exhausted to keep my eyes open. Then I called my mom, crying, because I did not know whether I was awake or not. I'm better now. Okay, story time. My mom suffers from narcolepsy, and one of the first treatments they gave her basically drove her also completely insane. She was up for 5 days. One day I walked into her bedroom, hearing her talking to someone. I look around and ask her who she is talking to, and she tells me the lady in red. There is no one in the room at all, just us. I ask where is the lady, and she says the lady sits on the dresser and talks to her all night. I was like 14 at the time, so I went into the kitchen and hid her medicine until my stepdad got home and could take her to the hospital. The ER doctor was super upset about the meds her doctor had given her. It was way too much. Anyway, she stopped seeing the lady after they got all that straightened out. So, in training to join the British Army Infantry, everyone does a defense exercise. Basically, you deploy onto the area, then spend 72 hours straight digging trenches, no sleep, no rest. It's a double whammy between sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Although I never hallucinated, I did pass out onto some bloke though. I did see a few blokes experience crazy stuff. One bloke walked into a foggy field and was missing for hours. Once he realized he was lost, he laid on the floor, flipping between the channels on his radio saying hello and hoping someone would hear him. Another bloke, who was a Welsh speaker, lost the ability to distinguish between the two languages. He'd speak to you in Welsh, then get annoyed when you didn't understand him, believing he was speaking perfect English.
Marine boot camp keeps you awake for the first 3 days straight, and if you fell asleep, you'd get fucked up real quick by the drill instructors. After 48 hours, I started hallucinating lights/swirls in my vision and had to mentally keep myself awake while doing absolutely nothing most of the time. Dozing off for even a second was a death sentence, so I had good motivation. When I finally got to sleep, I was woken up an hour into it by a rack mate because I had fire watch, and I could have sworn it was my dad, like 100%. I hallucinated my father waking me up because I was so tired, lost, and confused. Oh, I have a great cautionary tale for this. Me, 19, freshly sent to Japan for the US Air Force. A little pretext here. Japan is famous for the car culture there, and it inspires hundreds of thousands of people. One particular multi-track circuit that is incredibly famous is called Ebisu Circuit, and it has a festival a few times a year called Drift Matsuri. This particular event draws drivers and spectators from around the world to thrash their cars for 72 hours straight for one cheap price. Influencers fly in and buy a car for a week a lot, and it's important. I can't remember what caused me to stay up all night. I might have been gaming or I might have been studying, but it was Matsuri weekend at Ebisu, and Adam LZ, famous drift YouTuber, was going to be there with Taylor Ray. With Elisha being just around 150 kilometers away, I started my car and set out on my journey. I never had used the tolls before, so I ended up driving 7 hours instead of the originally predicted 3. I was also freshly imported into Japan and had yet to take my car on a true drive through the Japanese country, so I trucked on through single-lane roads, through rice paddies and small mountain villages. Honestly, not the kind of place my drift car was suited for, but it was dope. I ended up getting to the circuit at like 3:30, met the crew and hung out for a while, practiced on the skid pad, but I had to get back to base before 12. I stayed for an hour and turned around and went home. I'd been awake for close to 64 hours at that point. I really didn't have any issues until around 10:30. Back in the thick concrete jungle of Tokyo, I had a few hallucinations, but the worst was when I drove my car into a hole in the middle of the road. I was out for at least a few seconds, probably sleeping. I'm fortunate that the roads were next to empty around me, but I could have died that night, and everyone around me was in danger. Do yourself and everyone around you a favor. Don't drive tired. Visions. People existing where they shouldn't be, like walking across rafters and ducts, high above factory floors. Memory loss, irritability like you've never been through before. Pain. You lose time. An hour here, an hour there. Your cognitive abilities decline. I've gone week-long stretches where I probably averaged between 10 to 15 hours sleep over a 7-day period, so many times that it became normal. It wasn't that the stretches themselves were long, maybe 20 hours at most, but there was no deep sleep in the downtime. Without deep sleep, you start to go mad, and I've been pretty close to going over the edge. I once worked a 17-hour shift. I was working an event for a cocktail company. Work started early in the morning, and I drove about 30 minutes to their company premises. The event was a private wedding in a field, and we were a pop-up cocktail bar. After loading all the fresh fruit onto the van, I was driven about an hour away to the venue, where we unloaded the van. We had to physically set up a metal bar, stock it up, prep ingredients, decorate it, and get all the glassware ready. People started ordering drinks at 3 p.m., and it went on late into the night. Although we had breaks, we were on our feet all night. The person in charge of our van had forgotten to pack a light, so we loaded the van back up in the dark, almost ran over one of the guests who had passed out in the middle of the field, and I cut myself pretty badly. We got back to the barn storage at about 4 a.m., and I had to drive home. I was so worn out, I was seeing cows everywhere. I kept having to stop for cows in the road, cows in the bushes, on the side of the road, but none of it was real. When I eventually got to lighter roads, I stopped seeing shit that wasn't there, and I'll never put myself through something so dangerous again. Earlier this year, I took my partner to the ER because he was hallucinating. He was exhausted and dehydrated. His hallucinations involved having snippets of conversations with people who weren't in the room. On the way to the ER, he asked me, "Where did they go?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Your friends who were in the back seat." There was no one with us. I was going through a lot with an abusive ex. He'd keep me up for ages, and when I could finally sleep, I would have nightmares. So I started hallucinating spiders on my ceiling and it felt like hands were touching me. It lasted for days, since the hallucinations messed up the little sleep I got. I got diagnosed with the beginning psychosis and schizotypical disorder, mostly because I didn't dare tell them about my ex, so they couldn't set a PTSD diagnosis for me. They started giving me drugs to help the psychosis, but since it was because of my ex and lack of sleep, it didn't really help, and I had to deal with just being drugged as well. There were 2 incidents where I had auditory hallucination. 1. I took a child development class my junior year of high school. I had to bring home and take care of this plastic baby. However, it always needed to be cared for at night instead of during the daytime, and during the daytime, I would need to complete my homework, chores, care for my siblings or grandparents, etc. I think I got less than 2 hours of sleep in 2 or 3 days, and I always dreamt of the baby going off. When I would wake up, I couldn't tell if the baby was actually crying or if it was my dreams in my head. It freaked me out so much. My grandmother found me one night crying and holding the plastic baby in my arms. She asked what was wrong, and I responded with that my brother, who was a baby at the time, was crying because I hurt him and didn't know how to help him. I hallucinated that the plastic baby was my brother and that he was crying in pain. The plastic baby wasn't even crying. I told my mom and her husband about this after I returned the baby because I was scared beyond belief. They said it was perfectly normal once you have children, so I guess I'm never having children if it'll drive me insane. That sucks, because I really wanted kids, but I would only end up being a danger to myself and them because they would leave me so sleep deprived. 2. It was during the summer, my sophomore year of high school. I, of course, stayed up extremely late. I didn't even feel tired, but apparently my brain was, because all of a sudden I hear heavy breathing outside my bedroom door. It then followed with a cry for help, asking for someone to please help them, and they were after them. The breathing was heavy and the voice sounded strangled, struggling to breathe. That freaked me out too, but it was because I thought it was my grandmother, who slept next to my room. It didn't sound like her, but I was still worried about her. I woke my grandmother up to see if she was okay, and she said everything was fine. What is a creepy story you want to share? I had a stalker once. Every few days I would leave work and find a string tied around my car door handle. I thought it was fucking weird and kinda creepy, but didn't really think anything of it. A few months later, I got home from work and there was a string tied on the doorknob to my house. Again, fucking creepy, but whatevs. At this point, I was about to move in like 2 weeks. A week later, I came home and there were strings tied around everything in my house. Remote control had a string on it, cabinets had strings on them, my pillow had strings on it. Changed my plans and moved out the next day to a new city. Never had any other issues. In my senior year of high school, I was leading the drama club. We did warm-ups before we started improv. These warm-ups included voice warm-ups and body warm-ups. One of them was stretching the hips. We did hula-like movements, swaying hips side to side, back and forth. The chaperone for the club took me aside one day. She told me I could no longer lead warm-ups and needed to not participate in them. She said, "I'm an old lady, and watching you move your hips makes me have feelings an old woman should not have." I was too freaked out to process this and never told anyone. Christmas time, about 15 years ago, I was on a horse carriage in a historic part of downtown with my mom and brothers. The ride took us into a neighborhood away from all of the holiday festivities. As we turn a corner, we see a couple from behind walking hip to hip while pushing a baby carriage. They were really close together and walking kind of funny, but we didn't think anything of it since it was late and pretty cold out. As we got closer though, we realized that the guy in the couple was a dummy, wasn't walking, but was actually being dragged along by the woman. Think like a stuffed life-size toy or scarecrow type thing. He was attached at the hip to the lady. We ended up passing and looked back and saw that the baby carriage did not have a baby in it, but instead had a plastic baby doll in it. It was definitely very unnerving, seeing somebody who was apparently so far attached from reality that she created a family. She did not even react when we approached or passed by. Never seen anything like that in the area since. I was camping in the Appalachian Mountains with 3 of my guy friends. We were all laughing and telling stories around the fire one night around midnight. The friend next to me grabbed my leg and pointed at the woods. We both saw a man's silhouette standing there. We called out to him, but he turned around and vanished from sight. We were 18, no cell service, and camp was all pitched up at midnight. Too late to search for another spot where we might get away from whoever it was, and too scared to search for him. We decided to sleep through the night. There was 2-man watch teams. No signs of him for the rest of the night. We got out of the woods all right. 2 days later, 2 hikers were stabbed and killed by a mentally disturbed man who'd encountered them on a trail near where we were camping. Every now and then I wonder how close we came to having our cards punched that night by what could have been a knife-wielding murderer. When my best friend and I were 8, our parents agreed to let us walk home from school together since my house was only a few blocks away and our town was very safe. From the moment we left school, we both had the feeling we were being followed. A few minutes later, we heard footsteps and leaves rustling behind us. A couple times we counted down from 3, quickly turned around, and there wouldn't be anyone or anything behind us. Halfway home, we heard a loud snap, followed by a couple of very obvious footfalls behind us, and sprinted the rest of the way home. My parents said we were probably just nervous to be walking home alone for the first time and had imagined it, but we were 100% sure someone was following us. 20 years later, we found out we were right. But instead of it being a creeper, it turns out my friend's mom had paid her older sister to discreetly follow us to make sure we got home safely. She had stumbled and almost fell while trying to hide behind a tree, which is what we heard right before we started running. Not creepy in the end, but was sure terrifying at the time. I've told this story before, but in college, my roommate and I were walking home from the bar, and he noticed that some dude in a cowboy hat seemed to be tailing us. Initially, we thought, okay, he's just going the same way we are. But then we turned to walk down the street, and he kept on following us. Okay, maybe coincidence, and he's still just going the same direction as us. When we turned down another street, and he kept following us, my roommate suggested we walk toward the student center, where they had a campus cop stationed 24/7, and see what happened. I think the dude realized what we were doing because suddenly he bolted in the other direction, like full-on sprinted away from the building and down a random street. We told the cop on duty what happened, and he told us we did the right thing. Apparently, they'd been having issues with scumbags following students home from bars and either mugging them or staking out their house to see if it was worth their time to come back later. It's been almost a decade, but he and I still refer to it as the creepy cowboy story. The creepiest story I have actually involves my own actions, so here it goes. It was the summer of 2007, and I had just recently been discharged out of the US Army. September of 2006, I got home from Iraq. I was an infantry soldier and had seen a lot that I never thought I would. Fast forward back to 2007, I moved back in with my parents and was living with them while trying to figure out my life. I developed a habit of sleeping with a knife under my pillow, part of my PTSD struggles. One night, I'd been woken up from the dog barking outside their house. I spent apparently a long while walking my parents' yard and property line with the knife in hand. When I came to, I was standing in their yard, not knowing how I had gotten there. When I walked back in, my mother was awake and asking me why I was outside. Fast forward another couple weeks. This time I heard footsteps in the house and I awoke. I hid the knife against my arm as I crept through the house. I spotted a man in the kitchen drinking water. I slipped out the blade and I walked towards him. The man turned to me and said, "Son, are you okay?" I froze, hid my knife, and realized it was my dad. I was about to stab my own father, and he has no idea. A couple more weeks go by, and my dad and I were talking, and he looked at me and asked me if I remembered that night. I said, "Yeah, Dad, why?" He said he saw the knife, hugged me, and told me I needed help. I got help. So the creepiest thing was me not knowing who I was or understanding what had happened to me. I'm just glad I never took that last step, or my life would be completely different. I was about to get off at this bus stop in Germany when the bus driver tried to persuade me to come to his house. I was the only person on the bus at the time. I'm pretty sure it was my first time getting that bus because I remember being a bag of nerves because I wanted to pick up the kids I was looking after with no problems. I was an au pair in the country at the time. Anyway, I'm about to get off the bus when the bus driver closes the doors and starts to chat to me. Just general questions like where I'm from, what I'm doing in Germany, etc. Then, he asks me if I want to come to his house. It's nice, he says. I'm really scared now. The doors are closed behind me. I tell him no, I need to pick my kids up. He tries again, but again I tell him I have to go. He chuckles, then opens the door. I walk off the bus in a daze. Even now, I can't quite believe that happened, but my German was good enough to know what he wanted and how wrong it was. I think I was in shock for a while until later. Thankfully, an arrangement with a family friend was made so I didn't need to take the bus anymore after that. The woman I was working for also contacted and complained to the bus company on my behalf. I don't know if anything came of it. I don't believe in ghosts. With that said, mid-20s, late night at my parents' house, I woke up and went to the bathroom. They had a nightlight in the hallway so we can see. I didn't turn the light on. I opened the bathroom door to see my mom on the toilet in her white nightgown, elbows on her knees, face in her hands, her long hair covering her face so I couldn't see it. I apologized and went to bed. Apologized in the AM, and she denied it was her, chalked it up to dreams. We have property upstate. I'd stay home sometimes from school. I'd use the second half bathroom, leave the door open/cracked. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the same gown. I've told my parents about it, and they'd laughed and say I'm mistaken. Fast forward, I'm 37 now. Parents came over to my family's house, and my wife jokes about the story. This time with my dad, as my mom was outside with the kids. My dad has told me for years he's seen pretty much exactly what I've described to them both, drifting down the hallway, into a bathroom, or vanishing. He'd never seen the woman's face, and would catch glimpses at times as recent as about 2 weeks ago. I grew up in a small town. When I was 14, a friend and I were walking to another friend's house who lived about a mile outside of town. We started walking at about 1 a.m. On the way there, we walked by a house with 2 people standing in the road crying and hugging each other. As we got closer to the house, we saw that they had a big cross on fire in their yard. As we walked by the people, they stared at us until we lost sight of them. On the way back, we walked by the same house and nothing was in the yard and nothing looked damaged. To this day, we still talk about it. We never heard of anything on the news or from anybody else. The faces of those people in the street still haunt me to this day. Not mine, something my aunt told me. My cousin, when he was younger, randomly approached her and asked her to stop going in his closet at night. She obviously was confused and asked him about it. He says that he's seen her a couple of nights in a white dress, staring at him from the doorway and then walking into his closet, then politely asked her to stop. So, she says okay, and they never mention it again. They've moved out of that house now, but I can confirm that place was creepy at times. Without going into too much detail, I've had pretty freaky experiences all my life. Well, up until my mid-20s, I suppose. In our teens, my friend would get visited at night by something that caused him night terrors, that basically he half wakes up and he feels this massive pressure on his chest and he can't move or do anything. He called it the Force, and we would chat about it and such. To keep it short, one night, I was having this super weird dream that I was looking through the eyes of something else. It basically was going through all these tunnels under the area I live. It then came up through the woods near where my friend lived, rose up into his house, and I could see this into his bedroom, and in the corner was this kind of entity/shape thing, and I could see it pushing down on his chest. Next day, I asked him if he was okay, and he said he was visited again last night by the Force, so I told him about what I saw, and we were pretty spooked, but we didn't think much of it. Tunnels and such, no idea what that meant. Well, the following year at school, we were doing a local history lesson about a stately home in our town, an old house that belonged to the aristocracy going back hundreds of years. Well, in this lesson, we were told how they had built all these tunnels out of the stately home to get people out of the house safely if it was ever under attack for any reason. Lots of crap going on in England back then. So me and my friend asked the teacher how far up the tunnels went, but he said not that far, not up to where my friend lived, so we didn't think much of it. We were hoping this would connect up, as I lived near the stately home and could have explained that part of the dream vision, but we forgot it. Anyway, skip forward 5 years, and I end up reading an old newspaper article about my town and how parts of it were collapsing due to discovered mines in certain parts. I went and looked up the maps of the areas that we're concerned about. They basically spread from halfway into our town and went right up into the wooded area right by my friend's house. So the stately home tunnels and the old mines actually joined up and did come out right by where he lived. The hairs on the back of my neck went up, and I quickly phoned and let him know. This damn vision of the tunnels and woods fit perfectly with old existing underground systems, and that was pretty spooky. I also had many other creepy experiences while living near that old stately home, but I won't bore people with that. On a funny note, I don't believe in ghosts. I just don't know what the heck happened, and in most cases, I had others share the experiences or had actual evidence left behind, like a charred twig across my face or scratches in glass windows. Last year, I decided to make a short nature film about an area in northern Wisconsin. Part of my film included shots of the stars and the Milky Way. To get the clearest shot possible, I would have to drive 15 minutes out of town to get to a place with less light pollution. To give you a sense of how alone I was, I only saw one other car on the way in or out. I got to the place and stepped out of the car. It was the scariest feeling I had ever experienced. I started to set my camera up, and about 3 minutes in, an ambulance or a police car had its sirens on about a mile away. All of a sudden, at least 3 wolves started howling at me, maybe 200 to 300 feet away. This terrified me, and I ran back to my car and drove away. My new house has a few weird things about it. We moved from the city to a rural mountain town about 2.5 years ago, and it's a little weird. The first is, shortly after we moved in, a half-decayed deer appeared in our fence line, and it was partially burnt where the stomach had been. The next thing is hearing things that aren't there. I've heard on our front porch door open, my name called, and a car pulling in our gravel driveway, but most of the time I'm home alone. Other times, I'll go ask my parents what they need, and they are super confused. Our dog, really small golden retriever, who was about 2, we got her just after we moved as a puppy. She will not go by this one vent that is across the stairs railing. We have had it open, and there is nothing in there, but she will rear back and try to dig her claws into the floor if we try to pull her past it. If by chance she does go by it, she hugs the railing opposite the vent and will stare at it until she is fully past it. She also does this weird thing when I get home from school, where every day, without fail, she is on the top 1 to 3 steps of the stairs, right inside the door, staring down the stairs at my computer room. Nothing overly worrying, just very strange. I was working a remote site one night. Very little traffic on the highway, just meters from the boundary fence, no lighting along the road whatsoever. The power went out. Breakers were fine. Notified power company. Technicians came out a few hours later. As I left work, I saw the cause of the power outage. A young driver had crashed into a transformer. Not sure what it is exactly, but it had high voltage signs and power company logos on it that was just outside the boundary. I'd walked past the section of fence twice since the power went out, never saw the vehicle. Driver was still alive and was struggling to breathe. Spent a while comforting them until emergency services arrived. This didn't happen to me, but happened to my great uncle. He got out of the army in 1945 and returned home to the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. By the time the bus dropped him off near my great-grandparents' house, it was already dark. They lived on a farm, so there was no streetlights and had dirt roads. He decided to cut through the fields. Well, about a quarter through the field, he saw a tall figure standing in the middle, waving him to come closer. He said he was paralyzed in fear, but he had to get home. The people there were very superstitious, so he thought it was the devil and said he can't outrun him, so he put his head down and continued walking. When he looked up, the figure was still waving him to come closer, so he just kept walking. Finally, he was getting closer, and the figure was still waving him on. So, when he finally got close to it, he noticed it was only a scarecrow. But my grandma always said that it was the most terrifying thing he's ever seen.